Well, Dave, I wanted to tell you I missed the rigs and techniques here at the CCA workbench last week. But
Well, I'm sure you were learning some new ones up there.
I did. I
Running
did
from
learn
the bear.
some cool techniques. Exactly.
Always run from the bear.
Always.
You're not supposed to run from the
I
bear.
was okay because I just knew I could outrun my wife, Kathy, so
Well,
I
there
was
you
okay
go.
with it.
Well, you know, in the summertime, we were talking earlier about, you know, how the bass will go down and deep in the summertime. And what we have to do is we have to get down there after them. And what you have to remember, you know, all fishing is tied together. You know, what you do in one place really has a lot to do with what you do in another place. And it's especially true when you're out in the middle of a lake. It's like being out in the middle of an ocean, you know. And you're not just going to go out there and just start fishing. You're going to look for things that is different. Because, you know, the middle of a lake is just like an ocean. It's a big empty in most parts of it.
Right.
But we're looking for is the places where the bass will congregate. Usually places where the bait congregates, which, you know, we're looking for humps, you know, big mounds, brush pile, an old road bed,
Riprap,
an old canals, you know, anything that's different that's, you know, comes up off the bottom and will maybe hold bass or bait. And just like offshore, it's especially great if that piece of structure has a current on it. Because if you have current, that means you have, usually the bait's going to be there too.
Right.
And, or it's going to be coming by soon. And that's what those bass will do. They'll lay up near that cover, near the current, and hope that it brings something to them. And that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to get something down there to them. And, you know, a lot of times when you're fishing in shallow water, you know, you can see your bait and stuff, but when you're in deep water, you can't. So you have to really figure out what your bait's doing. You know, you just can't. You have to visualize in your head what's going on down there.
Right.
You know, and being in contact with the bottom most of the time is the best way to figure out where you are and what your bait is doing down there. Because you can feel it. You know, you can feel how fast you're bumping along the bottom, or you can feel if the bottom has weeds or stuff on it, and maybe you need to crank up a little bit. You know, being in touch with the bottom is really the only contact that you're going to have out there in that open water. You know, you're not like you're bouncing off stumps and stuff inside. You know, you could see that, but when you're out there, you're going to have to just rely on yourself a little bit more. And we'll throw probably the best thing, or the most commonly used lure in deep bait is a Carolina rig, and that's this one right here. And that's when you have a weight, you know, and a swivel, and then your bait is floating up beyond that. And this is a pre-made one. You can get these pre-made, or you can make them yourself. You can just buy yourself a swivel and put a sliding weight on here, and you don't have. And actually, that'll allow the bass to run off a little bit like a fish finder rig without feeling this weight. But otherwise, this will be the weight will be on the bottom, and you can feel it as it's dragging down the bottom, and this thing will be floating up above it just a little bit, moving along.
Because the plastic with no weight obviously allows it to want to float up, correct?
Correct. Or it'll crawl along behind it.
Right.
You know, if the hook's too big or whatever, it'll crawl along behind it. But it's fairly weedless rigged like that. And that's a great way to fish in deep water. Also, as Johnny Geis was saying, you know, the drop shot.
Right.
And that's when your bait, you have a weight on the very bottom, and then a hook tied into the middle.
So the weight's down here anchored on the bottom.
Correct, and it'll be bouncing as well. And once you get that thing down to the bottom, you can just jiggle this thing.
Look at how much action
And
it
does. It adds a lot of action. And if you can figure out how deep you want to make this, so that this your stick bait or even a swim bait or whatever is just above the height of the grass, and you can have, you know, that thing bouncing along, and it's just sitting out there all by itself alone. You know, another great thing to use obviously are big lipped crankbaits. They're a lot of fun. You know, you make a long cast so you can get those crankbaits down in that strike zone. You want them to be, you know, close to the bottom, bouncing along the bottom. Lipless plugs like a rattle trap. I've caught a lot of bass in dark water on that ugly green and yellow chartreuse.
But it makes noise.
It makes a ton of noise. You can cast it a mile, and it goes deep. If you let it sink, it'll go all the way to the bottom as well.
Rod tip down when you're retrieving.
Exactly, and it's a steady retrieve. Or even with those rattle traps, if you give them one of those little, shoves back a little bit and make it buzz a little bit, they'll hit it a lot of times right when it stops.
Pretty work over here. Time flew by. It
I know.
really did.
We
I
had
can't
so much
believe
more
that
stuff to talk about.
Well, we'll do it again.
Yeah,
We'll
man.
just pick up where we left off. There'll be Rigs and Techniques Plan
Part
B.
2.
Yes. You guys always have stuff to talk about over there, that's for sure.